One of the things that I've noticed, and I have to say it makes me quite sad, is that people from my generation refuse to change their mindset. And the mindset that we used to have was that the government doesn't really understand technology. And I understand why we believe that, because when we grew up, the internet was its infancy. And most of our parents genuinely didn't understand technology at all. Like, you had to help your mother learn how to type in Microsoft Word. And so that mindset was kind of true. Like, the government, most of the time, they would pass legislation without understanding how the internet works. And it was to the point where when you tried to get a job, you would have to write on your resume that, oh, I actually know how to use Windows and I know how to type in Word and Excel. And as ridiculous as this sounds, at the time, that was actually a skill. Like, back in the 90s, if you actually said that on a resume, you were considered a valuable candidate because not everyone knew, right? But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you want to look at it, time has passed. And we're not in the 90s anymore, we're in 2025. And the government is not just aware on how technology works. It has some of the best people on the planet working for them to explain them. Now, it may seem ridiculous when I say this, because most people think the government is incompetent, but the only reason they think that is because the government isn't delivering on its promises. But when you look at it from a cynical point of view, and if you're trying to see, well, the government is trying to exploit the people, and the government is trying to expand its powers, and the government is trying to promote politicians' grifts, well, then you realize that the government is actually hyper-competent. And the fact that it keeps remaining in power and it's managing to not solve problems, but manage people's opinions, and the same political parties are remaining in power for decades, and the same culture is being maintained, you understand that, well, actually the government is an extremely well-oiled machine, and it's achieving its actual purpose pretty well. And so they do know about technology, they understand these things, and to claim, oh, that's okay, I'm fine with the internet getting censored because I can always install a VPN. That's ridiculous if you believe that the government is unaware of what a VPN is, and more importantly, if you think that the government is unaware how to regulate or control VPNs. The government usually do what is called a risk assessment, or risk versus benefit, if you will. Like how much it costs in order to achieve compliance, and what are they gaining. Obviously, they're not going to try to control every single household, because number one, the government doesn't think in this ideological extremes. The government thinks in utilitarian things. Like, what do I benefit if I control every single household? And how much is the cost? And they realize that at some point you go through a diminishing return. And so it's not preferable to control every single household. But as long as you control like 70% of the population or 60% of the population, you call that a win. And the government like understands nuance and understands context. And so what they did is like, okay, like first let's get used to people having the internet censored. And you go on the internet and, you see that a lot of protests and a lot of stuff that you wanted to watch now requires you to dox yourself. And you get noticed with the idea. And some people go like, you know what, I'm not going to dox myself to go on Reddit. I'm going to install a VPN. Or I'm going to use a video game character. Or I'm going to do something, because I'm an adult. And the government claims that this law is not for me. So like, what the fuck does it matter? I'm not doxing myself. But you're accepting the standard. You're accepting the idea, at least, that on some websites or some things on the internet require people to dox themselves. But, it's not you. It doesn't affect you. You know how to bypass it. You're technologically savvy. And so the government allows for this to sink in, allows for people to get used to the idea that some things are censored, and then they start cracking down on the ways that you can avoid doxing yourself. And so they can crack down on stuff like VPNs. And this is where we're at, right? Notice how the crackdown doesn't even discriminate between people that have kids in their household. And so now Britain, a nation that was considered to be free, just, and prosperous 20 years ago, is trying to implement the legislation that you only find in Iraq, North Korea, Turkmenistan, or Belarus. In other words, like they want to restrict VPNs. And you gotta wonder, where is this moral panic about protecting the children coming from? Like, was there such a horrible event in society that, like, all of a sudden people grew this interest? Why is it happening all over the world in the same year? Because you have Britain, you have the European Union, you have Australia, you have the United States. All of these nations all of a sudden are talking about restricting the internet at the same time, trying to pass legislation. And then you realize, okay, well, maybe something did happen in the past. You know, maybe Donald Trump won the elections in 2016. You had certain elites and liberals that genuinely thought that humanity with Obama is going in a new progressive era. And they had plans and they had various ideas on how humanity should be social engineered to move forward. And those ideas collapsed. Why? Because Trump won the elections. And it's not Donald Trump himself, you know, because, like, it's easy to get the man on board. Like, politics works by making deals with the man, by, you know, negotiating. It's like you can get a man on board, but, like, the principle that the people can have a say in things, that the people can have ideas that don't come from the academia, don't come from the mainstream media, is incredibly dangerous. And so they decided to crack down on people's ability to speak. And this is how they're doing it, right? Like, they're looking at the model from China, from Iran, from Myanmar, from Russia, like other nations that already cracked down on their population. And, like, slowly but surely, they're pushing on, like, various methodologies in order to convince people that the internet should be censored and they should dox themselves when using the internet. Because I keep hearing, like, this is to protect the kids. But they don't seem to care that the kids are using video game characters to bypass this, while adults have to constantly dox themselves. And the question is, like, why have adults doxing themselves? Like, don't they already have IPs to track people? And the answer is, like, yes. But here's the difference. People aren't likely to self-censor themselves just because of an IP. Like, most people think that they can get away with it. But when you connect your actual government papers to your social media account, people become self-aware that they're being monitored. I keep getting the comparison with, it's like you go to a bar and you gotta show ID in order to go into a bar. So that's how it should be on the internet. The only difference is that when you're in a bar, no one tracks your conversation at the dinner table. Like, if you say a racist joke or a sexist remark at a bar, it stays in the bar. However, what this does is that everything you say on the internet gets monitored. And even like 5 or 10 years later, I have seen people getting canceled over shit that they said in the past. And this is, like, really chilling, because in a world where they want cashless societies and they keep pushing towards that, like, you can notice that governments around the world are trying to push towards people using credit more and more. In that world, you have payment processors like Visa and MasterCard with the ability of debanking people. And it actually happened to Nigel Farage, and now they're normalizing the debanking in the video game industry. Why the video game industry? Well, because most people probably don't go on websites like Pornhub, but almost everyone plays video games. So again, like, the process is normalization. Like, they wanted to normalize the idea that credit card companies do have the say in what people do or don't with their cash. And in a cashless society, being debanked would be a death sentence. It's worse than going to prison. At least when you go to prison, you get a trial, you get a lawyer, you get to argue your case. And at the end of the day, if you actually go to prison, you know, they still feed you, they still clothe you. You still have a roof over your head, you still have some healthcare over there. And you get a meal. But if you get debanked in a cashless society, you can't even beg for money on the street. No one can give you money, right? You don't have an account. You can't use a POS. Like, there's no cash. And that's the nightmare scenario that they're... And the government can even save money. Like, they don't have to imprison people anymore. And this is where, you know, they're trying to go. It's what is likely called a neo-feudalist society. If you look it up, like, there's an ideology surrounding about that. And people are willing to accept it. Like, I was shocked when I saw, like, so many Christians on Twitter last year. They came out of nowhere. Like this wasn't even a talking point. And I have to think that maybe it was a psyop. Because I made many videos talking about it. And people were thinking that I'm attacking Christianity. And I wasn't. Because it wasn't like Christians, you know, that have like a firm theological understanding and they believe in ritual and mysticism. No. You go on Twitter and you saw Christians just coming out with crosses in their bio, basically all of a sudden saying they want to ban pornography. And they promoted this type of legislation, like this exact type of legislation. And to me, it was bizarre because, like, hold on a little bit. Like, you want the government to do that, right? And for the last decade, literally 10 years, you have been constantly oppressed by the government. And you have constantly been censored. And now, because what? Like, because Donald Trump won the elections, you want the government to have the power to keep censoring? But and you're giving it the power to only censor your stuff. And you don't think like they're going to start censoring other things or that they're going to censor you. It's bizarre. I definitely think it was a psyop. Like, to see people that have constantly been censored asking for censorship and trying to make the argument, well, now it's different. It's like, okay, why are you doing this? Where is this coming from? And now I see the same people getting ratioed on Twitter because, like, what they wanted is happening in Britain. It's affecting the whole internet, and nobody likes it. Because they notice it's not about pornography. It's actually about the same thing that governments have always censored. Anti-establishment ideas. And the pornography is just to normalize it. It's a low-hanging fruit that everyone agrees, oh, it's bad, it's vile, we should get rid of it. That's what the majority of people think. And once they say yes, they get the bill of pork. That censors pornography, but like also other things. And now that people are using VPNs, they're like, okay, well, how can we ban people from using VPNs? Because the purpose is not to sanitize the internet. The purpose is to dox yourself. And despite the fact that there's a petition now that got over 300,000 signatures in a couple of days, like that's massive for Britain, right? Like this petition is going to be used to start a debate in the parliament. Despite that, they're like ignoring it and they're doubling down. No, we need to banning VPNs. They don't care what the people think. They don't want to debate. There's no negotiation here. You need to dox yourself. That's what they're saying. And so I do think that the future is going to be AI assistants running in offline mode. I think that the internet is going to become like cable. I think the internet is going to become like the Soviet Union, where everyone is afraid to post something there because it's going to be public record forever, etched in blood. And so people are going to use offline AIs where, you know, they can talk about their racist jokes without safety and not anything else. And then the government will probably try to regulate and legislate the hardware that goes into computers. Mark my words, like that's the next step. In 5 years, you'll see it. You're going to have like graphics cards, GPUs that will have like onboard processors that basically only allow certain flagged AIs. Like if they find AIs that aren't flagged, they will not run it. There's already discussions in the academia to do that. So I think that's the next step, right? Because like at the end of the day, what they want is to make sure that people don't have ideas. Not about pornography. It's not about any of that. It's simply about the fact that it should be incapable for a person to even think of a different way of life than what the politicians are suggesting. That's neo-feudalism, right? Universal morality. And the morality is going to come from the government and the academia. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, I will see you on my live stream. Take care.